Welcome to Simply Sarah. I'm Sarah Stock. I'm your host, and we're just so grateful that you are here. You're going to be learning about some things, and perhaps you know about Project Healing Waters, but you're going to be learning some things, I think, today about how to help people move forward. People perhaps who have PTSD, perhaps people who don't have PTSD. But in this space of being able to learn and open and grow and hear about other tools and techniques that can be so very helpful. We want to also thank, with just deep gratitude, Lamano Art and also the Stegner family for their incredible support of Simply Sarah. And we are also thankful for you being here. And so as I bring Woody into the studio, Woody, I just want to say thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Would you please share a little bit about what Project Healing Waters is, and then we'll ask for your story of how you got into working with them.
Absolutely. I guess the simplest way is, it's fly fishing for veterans, and it's really just a conduit to help veterans get out of their headspace and into another place that's healthy and covers, I guess you want to say the concept of whole health resilience and what that means. So it's a personal journey for each, but fly fishing, and then I guess everything around fly fishing is a conduit for doing that.
Yeah. So it's an opportunity for community with other vets out of their regular life and an opportunity to get out into the wild, into the open, and to do catch and release and enjoy that space and time together. So, Woody, how did you become involved with Project Healing Waters?
It's interesting. I guess the easiest, I get my neighbor, Tim, had been fly fishing for, well, his entire life. And I grew up in Montana, didn't ever learn to fly fish. I did learn how to tie flies when I was younger, which is very interesting. You'd think it'd be the complete opposite. But
Right.
um, and one day I just said, "Hey, can you teach me how? I want to see if I can learn this thing," because I was always somewhat intimidated by it. And then Tim taught me and took me fishing for my first time. I caught my first fish, and he was a catch and release guy as well. And he ended up really becoming a big brother to me in a lot of different ways. But it kind of stuck after that. And then I started researching, well, how can I get more involved in fly fishing? And really, I came across Healing Waters. It had been mentioned to me about, when I was still in the military, about, I guess it was 2014, maybe 2015, right before I got out. And so I said, I'm going to check this out to see what that's about. And I had actually started as a desire to volunteer and see if I could help, though I didn't really have the experience to fly fish or to teach other people to do it. But I thought I could help out in other ways.
Cool.
And they said, Alan Boats, the program lead for Colorado Springs, said, why don't you let us serve you for a while, and then you can come back and serve others. That was very impactful to me. And so I went on a couple of trips and saw what it actually did. And then things started to come together based on what Tim was doing. He was really doing the same thing. It was just on an individual level with me. So
Tim is a fabulous big brother to so many people. He just has that incredible heart. And if you get invited in to the house, you always say yes, because he's phenomenal in the kitchen.
yeah.
And he'll even sing as he's making meatballs. It's just an incredible experience to be able
Yeah.
to be there and to just grow in a different way, to learn. And I've always found it fascinating that he, although has been fly fishing, I think all of his life, for sure all of his adult life, that he doesn't eat fish. And so I think it really is easy for him to do the catch and release.
Right.
that space of being able to enjoy the outdoors, the beauty, the camaraderie, the getting up early in the morning and having the quiet time together as you're driving out to the spot. I think that all of those things play into that.
Oh,
That
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, what are some of your favorite experiences, both in the position of receiving, of getting to go along and learn about projecthealingwaters.org from the inside, and then also now that you're in leadership and supporting in other ways, what have been some of your favorite parts of each of those parts of the tandem?
Oh, I guess from the inside, just I'm being welcomed in. That was number one. Is that sense of belonging. And a lot of times when you leave the military, you aren't entirely sure where you belong. Where do I fit in this world?
Mm.
And so with that group of individuals, again, just being welcomed in
Yeah.
as a family member, if you will, kind of the way Tim welcomed me into his fly fishing world, right? Um, uh, and I'd say more than anything, it's that sense of camaraderie. And it sounds
Mm.
somewhat, I guess, cliche to say, we have fishing stories, but at the end of the day, we really do have those stories that to share and keep us connected.
Mhm.
Uh, and then just the world opening up with regard to, whether you want to learn to tie flies, whether you want to learn more about entomology, whether you want to build a rod or a net. And there's so many different components within the organization that allow you to uh, engage, get connected, and stay connected.
Mm.
So,
I love that space of not just being welcomed in and getting connected, but that space of the longevity of staying connected. How incredible to find a brotherhood, a sisterhood outside of the military, right? A place that you can call home. So that was from the inside. And so now that you are somebody who has been on the inside, but also is helping to do the organization parts of it, what are you finding in this particular space that is expanding, that is encouraging for you, that lights your spirit? Um,
sure. Well, and just to be clear, my role is in operations within Colorado Springs. So I support the operations piece of it, making these trips happen, and then you got education components and outreach and other things. But one of the biggest things that I'm seeing with this organization, I was big into resilience when I was into the military, and um, at, at, at the time we were doing a lot between Iraq and Afghanistan. Sent a lot of folks downrange, coming home and trying to reintegrate. And the one of the big things that were being pushed was this concept of resilience. And kind of, at the time when you looked it up, you could only really find about resilience in the corporate world,
right.
and maybe a little bit in the healthcare industry from even a business perspective there. Um, and so the military started really engaging with it, but it was a lot of instruction, basically. And I apologize about my dog, but basically, you it was instruction with regard to sitting down, learning about what resilience is, and then going home,
Mm.
or
Right.
going back to work. And we started doing it from I guess, an asymmetric application process. Okay, so and I'll give you a quick example, and then I can jump back in how this is also connected to healing waters, because it's strange how it all kind of did connect. But one of the things we were doing is when I had young men or women come back from a combat tour, we would do, after their um, 2 weeks of R&R at home, we would bring them and their significant other, and sometimes even if they had kids, we would bring them up to um, a place that was almost like, well, it was a former Girl Scout camp, and we would do a program with high ropes with them.
Mm.
And so there was one young lady in particular who had she was doing convoys outside the wire in Afghanistan, and had a situation that, she came back and she was not happy with leadership in general, just really struggling. And so we got her out there, and that was a part of a breakthrough. But then I actually got her certified in the high ropes, and we partnered uh, kind of on the side, not officially as military, but we went through another outreach program, and uh, it was called Candlelighters, and they were kids that the siblings of children, and then children with cancer.
Mm.
And so we got her certified up there. And when she got the opportunity to bring someone up, she was helping a little girl up the ladder to walk across a 30-foot pole. Of course, they have their safety harnesses and they're all safe and everything.
Sure.
And uh, when this little girl got up there, and I'll never forget it, I was kind of down on an angle looking up, and my sergeant said, wow, it's high up here. I'm kind of scared. Are you? And of course, remind you, this little girl is not fully blind, but definitely significantly blind. And she said, no, I'm not afraid at all.
Mm.
And my sergeant said, well, why is that? And she said, well, because I almost died last year. I'm not afraid of anything anymore.
Wow.
And she walked across that pole. But my my young sergeant helping her do that and hearing that, it was one of those moments that just caught my breath. But I guarantee it changed the entire outlook
Mm.
for my sergeant, changed everything. And that's of course, when you talk about resilience, it's growth through adversity. But then you also read books like Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, and you start to understand the giving of yourself selflessly to help others through hardship. They don't only create growth in or help with the growth of that individual, but they help in your personal walk or your personal growth. And so I kind of saw some things firsthand while I was in. Didn't ever really see anything beyond that. We continued to work it, and I got very, very into resilience and actually teaching self defense from a resilience perspective, the growth through adversity. To like battered women shelters, women in those kind of locations for a while. But years later, then of course, coming across Project Healing Waters, I saw that they're they're creating resilience through kind of the whole health framework, if you will. And if you can go onto the VA, you can go. There's a lot of different components and different ways people view whole health. We, what we're looking at is whole health resilience. So one of the components is holistic integration. It views whole health as an interconnected kind of contribution, if you will, to resilience. So there's empowerment, there's community and connection, natural transition to purpose, which is my personal favorite.
Yes.
Because I think that's really when we get, if you want to look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, when we transition to purpose,
Mm.
I think we start to truly get to that concept of, or at least get closer to self-actualization.
Mhm.
And Healing Waters does that. In fact, there's only one other, and it's not that fly fishing is the end all beat all, but I truly have not seen a whole lot of programs that cover, if you look at, cover so much
Mm.
in in um, in in a program that I don't even know if sometimes they even understood that they, when it was created, I don't think they knew really what they had created, in my very humble opinion. And it's just this natural thing that grew out of it. And I've seen some other places. There's a program out there called Mayfly Project.
Mm.
And so it does the same thing we do, but with kids in the foster system.
Mm.
So they operate, I guess, in the same fly fishing space, but they hit a different demographic.
Sure.
And I just think things like that to me are exciting and incredible, and they give me hope.
Oh, I think one of the things about resilience is if there's even a sliver of hope. And sometimes I think we have to borrow someone else's hope every now and then to be able to see it. But if we can, that is that forward propelling space of um, let's put 2 feet on the ground tomorrow and try this again.
Yeah.
Yeah, such a powerful place. And I love the story about your sergeant. And just the perspective of this child who's nearly blind saying, I'm not afraid of anything because I nearly died last year. I mean, that's a space of, oh, let me take a fearless inventory and see
Right.
the areas of my life that I'm holding back on for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, that sense of purpose is so incredibly powerful,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah.
Once you truly latch onto something, and like Project Healing Waters, I've seen it in a very short period of time create a space for a lot of people to find their purpose in a lot of different ways, whether they're a mentor, helping a participant veteran one-on-one, whether they're planning trips, whether they're working the administration, teaching a rod building class. And then the other piece of it is too is, when you're in the military, I don't like to say, you become institutionalized, and it's not necessarily in a bad way, but you
Right.
are institutionalized. And so just understanding, because you don't know who you can communicate with. You think, oh, everybody has to be in the military to understand you or have been in the military. And one of the other cool things I saw is that people that had no military background just wanted to give selflessly, and finding that connection with them, finding, wow, we have a lot more in common than I ever would have realized. And they have incredible and interesting stories as well.
Mm.
So it truly is like Sebastian Younger describes as a tribe.
Yes. Yes. We're going to take a quick break to say thank you to our sponsors. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Michelle. I am the founder and owner of Lamano Art. I began this business over 20 years ago. I specialize in paintings of all kinds. I make murals, portraits, and live paintings. My specialty is color and also telling a story. Some of the work that Lamano Art does are calligraphy pieces, wedding invitations, sign work, and sculptures like fairy doors. I'm open to working with anyone on any idea. Please feel free to contact me at your convenience, and I look so forward to talking to you. Thank you.
Woody, I'm really enjoying this conversation about your involvement, of how you got involved with Project Healing Waters, how impactful it's been for you, and how you are now helping other people to have these experiences. I would love for you to share a little bit more about this space of purpose and resilience. I think that it's such a deep I think that you have such a deep understanding of it. The way that you speak about it comes so easily. And I think that this is something that is really important for our listeners to have just a different perspective on how fly fishing helps out with this concept of finding our purpose and um, strengthening that space of resilience.
Yeah. Boy, I it's interesting because you don't realize it when you're in the military, and there's a lot of professions that are out there, whether it's doctors, nurses,
Mhm.
definitely teachers, um, where you choose a profession that actually creates a positive feedback loop in the giving of yourself. So there's that natural. Um, your purpose is laid out for you every day when you go to work, and I'm not saying that that's not true in a lot of different,
Mhm.
but sometimes in the corporate world it's more about the I guess the end game of money and whatever that is that purpose, but it's not necessarily giving to others of yourself
Right.
selflessly. And so they have to find it in other ways. I mean, sometimes jobs just don't do that.
Mhm.
More often than not, unless you're really lucky, I think. But
Yeah.
so the military definitely does that. You're indoctrined in basic training and then throughout to say, here is your purpose in life. And it may not be to an individual, but it's to the support of our nation or whatever. But then what happens is as you grow in rank, you end up supervising other people.
Mhm.
And so it does have that kind of natural, well, now when you're a supervisor, the expectation is you care for your troops more than you realize. You become, when I joined in 1988, you know, I, a father figure to me was my very first NCO, and he was from Texas. Always had a big wad of chew in his mouth, and had that big Southern drawl, and
Right.
and I was 18 years old. But when I messed up, he was the first one to kind of kick me in the rear and tell me to
Mhm.
get going. But then he was also the one, him and his wife, that would have us over to their house for Christmas and Thanksgiving dinner and care for us in ways that you don't really realize someone is until you're reflective enough to go back on it later in life.
Yeah.
And so the military, because you will promote,
Mhm.
theoretically, you will supervise other people, and so there's that natural transition to having to take care of other people, and if you don't do it well, you don't get promoted.
Right.
So the to me, I, I like I said, I'm a big fan of Viktor Frankl and Man's Search for Meaning, and you can talk about logotherapy and all those other components of his story. But what really, really, really resonated with me was the concept of giving of ourselves to another human being without the expectation of um, reward.
Yeah.
You know, um, and you can look out and again, it's not my place to judge, but I have to also be aware of it when I look internally, when I'm reflective, like, okay, so why did I go volunteer and do this thing? Why did
Mhm.
I take care of this person? Did I do it so that other people could look at me and say, oh, what a great and wonderful person you are?
Yeah.
Or did I do it with what I would call true intent, the intent of just
Mhm.
helping them and not ever needing that recognition?
Mhm.
And um, you hear teachers talk about it sometimes that they may never know if they've impacted a child's life.
Yeah.
And so I'm always amazed at what teachers give.
Mm.
And because, to me, it's like they give of themselves without any expectation of reward other than sometimes a meager paycheck. You
Yeah.
know, it's so uh, I'm, in order to truly get there, I do think you have to be reflective. You have to sit back and say, why did I do what I did?
Mm.
Did I have true intent? And if not, how can I reframe that process?
Mhm.
And I think that that's when we start to get to, again, the concept of real growth in personal growth. And if we aren't reflective and we aren't true to our, well,
Mm.
why did you really do that? You can tell the world one thing, but why did you really do what you did?
Yeah.
And once you're able to recognize that, I think you start
Mhm.
to see real growth in yourself and even the others around you.
Woody, for the people who are coming in to the beginning, so you're speaking in some ways to the people who are in the position that you are in, helping to create these experiences for other people. So you're in more of that giving capacity right now. But for the people who are just coming in and they are receiving, can you speak a little bit to ways that they can, my words, you'll have a better way of saying this, but be more receptive, more open to the process of receiving? I know that having grown up in the Democratic Republic of Congo, coming back to the States, we do 4 years there and 1 year here, and the radical difference that would happen in 4 years. And yes, we did move to different places when we would come back based on my parents, what they were working on, or um, I'm the youngest, and so older sisters going to college, right? We'd get kind of based where we could, my parents could be supportive as my sisters were transitioning into college. Um, can you speak a little bit to that space? Because I remember coming and just being wide eyed. And, I looked like I fit in, but there wasn't much about me after those experiences where I felt like I fit in. And,
Yeah.
you have this space of being able to talk about the being receptive to the community, receptive to growing.
Yeah. So I think the first piece is just one, it's accepting that there is almost well, not almost, it's a primordial desire to belong.
Mm, yes.
And so we try to find places where we do belong and fit in. And sometimes if we're from a small town, we have that it's there, I guess. You get that small town feel. You know who your clique is. You can hang out with them. But so yeah, we all have that desire to want to belong to something, and a lot of times we want that something to be greater than ourselves. That give back. But I guess there's a couple of components that you hit on when you talk about being receptive to receiving. First of all, I think in the West we have a tendency to think we don't qualify for help in regards to that kind of tribal support, if you will. It's like it's kind of like my story. It was so strange. I bring it up. It seems somewhat benign because Alan said to me, how about you let us serve you for a while, and then you can come back in. And I was like, it just blew me away. I was like, well, nobody's ever said that to me.
Right.
And I found that I was like, okay. And it was not a comfortable place initially.
I bet.
So I think that we've got to be open to say it's okay to I guess it's almost, you almost got to look at it like the crawl, walk, run. Well, where does that come from? Well, that comes from growing into adulthood, and
Yeah.
there's things you're not capable of when when you're a baby, a child, that you are capable of as you grow. But if you look at the resilience process, you've got to let other people in, and you've got to create that space so that they can help you, and that's not always easy. You
Yeah.
know, like I said, especially when you come from a place where you're always the one giving or used to being that, because that's also part of your identity at the time. But now I'm I'll tell people you need to just hang out for a year, participate in the program, and when I tell certain people that, we have, I'll give you an example. We have, retired colonels and sometimes generals, and to tell them to just come in and be a participant is not easy.
Yeah.
And a lot of times too, I think we have a tendency to look at being a participant as, well, you're the bottom of the rung, there's this hierarchy, and it's not like that at all. It which is what amazes me. There's from a leadership perspective, there is that, okay, you can't have an organization without having a ship's captain, if you will. Somebody's got to steer the ship, and they have their engineers and all those other folks to do it. But this organization is so heavily a volunteer organization. So Colorado Springs, we have, we're the largest, and then Denver is the second largest in the U.S., but we have almost close to 600 participants, another 270 volunteers in addition. And so somebody has to drive that ship, but we're an all volunteer organization. So it's all volunteers that are guiding that. And I know there's a lot of other organizations out there that do that very same thing. But we're starting to do things like, we're going to call it a 2-year tour of duty, almost like so I'm in an operations role, but one of the very first things I did in this operations role is I identified someone to take my place.
Right.
And so that in 2 years, and there's a mentorship component to that. There's a mentorship leadership component to that. It's like, letting that person grow and grow without fear of failure, so that when their turn to step into the arena, if you will, they're ready. And now you're sitting back as a mentor, watching, guiding as needed. And the organization hasn't always been, intentional with that. But what I've seen very recently is that they have become very intentional with it. In fact, that tour of duty I got from a lovely young lady in Montana, Daisy. So she's a hired person, but she runs the Northwest region for the program. Beautiful family, her husband and then daughter, Emma. I got to put a shout out to Emma because I'm sure they're going to listen. But and then Sean, her husband. But she's the one that gave me that idea, and she wasn't in the military. Her father was, but she never did. And I was like, that's an incredible way to look at it. And so she's actually the one that encouraged that intentional process. So I'm not sure if I answered your question entirely. Sometimes I get lost on some tangents. And
You're doing great, Woody. I really appreciate that space that you talk about, the intentionality of leadership. But I think there's also an intentionality of when somebody says to you, come and just experience, take a year, just come experience for a year, being intentionally open and willing to move into that space. Detoxing is not, from my experience, is not an easy thing. And there can be some uncomfortable feelings along with that, whatever the type of detoxing that we're doing, whether we're moving from not getting a lot of sleep from a period of time into getting more. You would think, oh, it'd just be so easy just to put the head on the pillow and sleep. But my experience is it's not like that. And as somebody who I call myself a recovering teacher after being in the classroom for 35 years, that space of not having a classroom, not having students, there really is something about that first full year. And we know this when people are grieving somebody that's close to them, that, the first holidays, the first birthdays, the first, all of those things are difficult. But having just recently gone through this, I've been away from my job for about 21 months now. And it was a good 14 months before I wasn't looking at my clock saying, oh, it's time for lunch now, or, where are my kids? And I know that that sounds so funny because we relocated across the country. You'd think, oh, you cut those ties as soon as you couldn't hear the bells, and not the case. And so I just find that to be an interesting place. Also, of you speaking of very intentionally about being open, being receptive to taking that year, a little bit maybe more, but to go through all those feels of, gosh, this is so uncomfortable, and yet I know this is how it's supposed to be, and finding other people to have conversations. I was so pleased that my aide left at the same time that I did. And, she had grandkids to be taken care of and plans to do, and she was missing golfing. And so on days where I was like feeling like the ship was going sideways,
Right.
I would reach out to her and just to kind of find out what she was doing, and she would share. And then that would just get me thinking about, oh, I just need to be more intentional about what I'm doing rather than waiting for things to happen to me. This is a space for me to be doing things, being intentional
Right.
about moving forward.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. It's so interesting that, we have our transition assistance programs out of the military, but it's really to help you find that next job.
Right.
But there's a headspace there that nobody talks about.
Yeah.
And, because your students gave you that sense of purpose, right?
Right.
When you were there, that gave you, for me, it was my troops, but
Mm-hmm.
little things like, not like, you said, well, where are my students at, or the lunch bell, but just even
Yeah.
what time do you have to wake up in the morning?
Exactly.
It gives you routine,
Mm-hmm.
whether and it's interesting. You don't like it. Well, you say you don't like it when you're in the middle of the routine, but then you get out of it and you're like, oh, maybe I do. Maybe there's something to that.
Yes.
So yeah, I think that, being able to just embrace that transition and accept it for what it is, which is, it's a transition. There's a loss there without question.
Right.
Um, and kind of understanding how to deal with that and where do you go with it. And the other thing is you may still not know what you want to do when you grow up, so you have that at least that's the way I always felt. I was like, wow, I'm
Mm-hmm.
doing something that I never thought I'd ever imagine doing, and so I still didn't know what I wanted to do when I grew up, and that was after 27 years in the military.
Right.
Is figuring out who you are, but also status has a lot to do with it.
So much.
The and I know it happens in corporate world. I've seen it. Somebody is a senior executive and they retire, and it's really hard for them not to identify as that senior executive. It's like, well, that's where I got part of my identity. That's where I've gotten. And the military was the same way. Your rank provides you that. It's like all of a sudden when people, when you're not getting saluted anymore,
Right. Yeah.
when you walk into a room and people don't automatically stand up to attention when you walk into a room, and I always told myself that once I was out, it's just going to be Woody.
Yeah.
And not to literally and proverbially carry that rank on my sleeve.
Right. Yeah.
You know?
As you were speaking about senior executives, my husband and I have laughed about this. When we relocated, there was this beautiful golf group that said, hey, come play golf with us. Again, an incredible offer that he didn't take lightly at all, how incredible it was that they were saying, we want you to come be part of what we do. And but people would say to him, what do you do? And he would say he was retired. And there'd be no more questions. no questions like, what did you do? Where, nothing like that. It was just like, it was a conversation stopper. And we've laughed about that so many times because in the position that he was in, there was always these next follow-up questions. And, none of that.
Yeah.
And the first several times, it's like, you're supposed to ask another question. And when they don't, you're like, is this socially awkward,
Right.
or is it something wrong that I said, or what? And it's, people don't necessarily know, but if you tell them what you do, then they're like, oh, let me push into that some more. If you
Yeah.
tell somebody that you're in the military, they want to know what you do in the military, what's your position, and sometimes those pieces really do line up with the person's personality. And sometimes they have the skill set and they're really, really good at it. And this can also be in non-military, but just because you're good at something doesn't mean that you love doing it. And
Right.
so there's some of those pieces as well of finding out who you are. I just turned 60, and Woody, I'm in that space of figuring out who I am now that I'm supposed to be all grown up and knowing, right? I know I'm a recovering teacher. What else am I?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So all those beautiful spaces.
Yeah. And it is, I used to, so I have the distinct opportunity to teach young people now. And, one of the things we talk about is being able to go and introduce yourself and get to know somebody without trying to establish a hierarchy, which we have a very strong tendency to do in the West. And people, they do it all over the world. It's in different ways, like when you maybe in the Middle East, it's how long your beard is or how thick it is, how many boys have you sired, whatever the case is. It's different in every country. But in America, we have this, when we first meet somebody, we got to find out where they're from, what they do, not always in, and I got to be cautious saying this because I don't want to come across as judgmental, but it's not always in the guise of getting an opportunity to know someone. It's to establish the hierarchy of this current relationship as it is. If I know, for example, you're from this side of town as opposed to this side, that you probably have money. Okay, so does that make you higher in the hierarchy than me? What do you do for employment? Does that make you, and so I actually like to just step outside of that and focus on getting to know the person that I'm engaging with, and see how much I can learn about them and truly get to know them. But when I'm asked those questions, I'm intentionally vague. I think I intentionally, it's even in how we dress, right? Or how we look, and so I'm good with who I am right now, and if that's a scruffy old man, then then it is what it is. Because I guess I've gotten to a point which I consider myself very fortunate, is that I don't need to impress others. I want to help others. There's a difference.
Yes. I know somebody who's incredibly intelligent, a double certified physician. If you ask her what she does, she says she works at a hospital. And if you look at her, you go, oh, you must be the janitor. And it's just how she chooses to show up when she's not in the space of what she does, right? Because she wants to live life. She doesn't want the conversation to move a certain direction, because as soon as she says, this is who this is what my profession, the conversation invariably moves into that field, and she wants to be able to have easy conversations with people.
Yes.
So I appreciate you mirroring in your own way that same kind of thing, rather than, leaving on your sleeve your rank and all the different pieces, choosing to say, this is what my name is. And even when we were getting on today, you had Woody on there, and you were like, is this enough? And I was like, well, let's go ahead and put in a couple other pieces just so that people can find you if they want to, right?
Okay,
and learn more about projecthealingwaters.org. But that space also of, this is who I am. This is This is my choice of life. It doesn't negate at all the skills that you have, the hard work that you've put in to get to the rank that you had. It's just saying that you are, in addition to all of those accolades, you are human, and that you want to get to know people on that human level as well. Which brings us back to Project Healing Waters. I think that that's one of the greatest things. Is I listened to you and Tim talk about it, and his great respect for you and what you were doing here. I think that part of that underlying conversation was seeing people who are coming out of the military, whether they are injured in ways that we can see or not, that they have a place that they can come and learn something new with other people who are learning something new. And you did a lot of that in the military. And so being able to do that now as civilians in a different place, in a different way, and yet still have that vocabulary that sets you apart, right?
Right.
That allows that inner levels of communication that outsiders wouldn't necessarily understand. And what a beautiful, truly healing place that is. And then water in and of itself is so healing.
Oh, yeah.
We are born, and whether we are cesarean sections or not, there's water that's happening, right?
Yeah.
And when people go through spiritual experiences, so many different groups will use water as a symbol of that moving into a new level or a new experience that way. And so we see water as these open gateways, and how important water is for us as we drink the water, but also how healing it is. Just ask somebody who has spent too much time out sunbathing,
Right.
hasn't been drinking water, right? Or someone out in the desert who's been on patrol and doesn't have enough water with them because they got stuck out there longer than they thought they were going to be. How absolutely life-changing it is to come into a state of hydration afterwards.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I love that analogy, come into that sense of hydration. Because that's really, you're feeding the soul, right?
Yes.
You're providing that life needed energy, right? Through that. And that's a great analogy. I think I'm going to have to start using that, if that's okay with you.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Woody.
So yeah, and there's also, to be honest, I don't know that I could cover what it does and what it is in an hour a day, or it'd have to be because I'm still learning and figuring things out in terms of what it does. For example, when people show up, there's a number of us that are big on hugs. And I believe that there's a transfer of energy in a handshake without question, but it's not always a positive transfer of energy.
True.
Also be a dominance transfer of energy, an angry transfer of energy, but it's hard when you give somebody a hug to have anything other than humility and compassion and all those things wrapped up into a hug. Well, we're talking a bro hug, but that there is that transfer of energy, and it's so interesting to watch, because there's a lot of vets. They may have been comfortable giving a bro hug to somebody in their unit, but then all of a sudden to receive it in this other new environment, they're like, okay, I'll just but when they grow into it, it's something else. I mean, it really creates there's a connection there.
Yeah.
Like, you belong with us. You're part of our tribe. And so I'm a big proponent of that as well.
For me, I'm a huggy person, in part, I think, because it takes away you don't see the other person when you're hugging them, right? You're feeling their energy that can sound a little bit odd, but in some ways you are. And I remember hugging my great aunt, and just how when I saw her, she looked well, but yet when I hugged her, she felt so frail. And she would never have said that to me. She wouldn't have tried to convey that at all. But there's a transfer of a different level of knowingness,
Mm.
uh, without being invasive, and without it being awkward. And the same thing, though, when you're receiving a hug. And I had a friend who would always say, "Oh, we need to hug so that our hearts, it's heart to heart hugging, right?" And, she was always really big about opening up the heart. And, but that space of being vulnerable, there's also that. Again, going back to living in Africa and coming to the States, figuring out how to hug somebody here where your feet are supposed to go, that took a moment. And so,
Yeah, I can imagine. That's
and so I'm thinking also potentially, when you give a bro hug and you're in uniform, it feels very different because everyone knows where their feet go and where their hands go and stuff. And now you're, on
yeah,
the bank getting ready to go in with fishing rods and, how do we do this? And what does it look
yeah,
like? And we don't give ourselves opportunities to try new things so often because we're so afraid of failure.
yeah,
And if we can take that space off of being open to the possibility. In the past, I was afraid of this, or I felt uncomfortable with this, and I'm going to try something new. So in this space, I'm open to the possibility of what this could look like, possibly going forward. And then also, as somebody who was more introverted, especially when we came back to the States, I watched everybody around me. I learned that. It took me a while to figure it out. But when I
yeah.
figured out that I could watch what other people were doing, which meant that I was always behind in what I was doing, but yet I would have more level of success
Hmm.
by watching other people, then that also gave me a different level of comfortability of being able to figure out how to move in this new society, this new space.
Oh, absolutely. And it is so interesting. I think that one of the hardest things is just letting go of, uh, you called it, there's a fear of failure, but there's the, um, we all wear masks, right?
So
And
true.
it's that fear of of other people not
Mhm.
seeing your genuine self, but not approving of it.
Yes.
Um, but I'll tell you, when you can start to let that mask go,
Mhm.
it is so it's just fun. It's I was in the Denver airport with my son over the holidays. Well, my son came, and so we went to pick up his older brother and his brother's wife at the airport. And young people are particularly adverse to um, showing their true selves in public. And but the Denver International Airport had these service dogs that they would walk around the airport to for
Oh,
people to pet.
yeah.
So after a flight, there was this calming aspect to it. And of course, we didn't fly, but I saw that dog and I had to go, and I was, I pet the dog, I was giving it hugs, and my son was mortified. And I was like, just pet the dog.
Yeah.
Nobody's watching. See what happens.
Yeah.
And so he actually did. And we got back to the car. He's like, "You're right, Dad.
Yeah.
That was pretty cool." And so, I'm like, man, I wish I had learned to not wear the masks I was wearing a lot younger.
Yeah. We wear them for protection. We think that at least it's going to give us some level of protection. And when we realize that it may not be doing what we think it's
Right.
supposed to be doing, uh,
Mhm.
that coming into that place again of finding our purpose. And I don't think that we can find our purpose if we're not willing to take some of those masks off and be vulnerable and play in the mud, try to
Yeah,
figure it back out, right?
absolutely. Absolutely. There's too much new stuff out there to learn and to figure out about yourself that not playing in the mud is just a non-option for me,
Yeah, yeah.
so.
As we're wrapping up this incredible conversation, Woody, are there some things that you want to make sure that our listeners leave with that you want to reiterate?
Um, I, this is the first podcast I've done, so
Mhm.
I'm not entirely sure, but I guess the biggest thing is if you truly do want to step outside your comfort zone, I would encourage you to do that in whatever capacity that is.
Mhm.
and to help others.
Mm.
I mean, and really be reflective enough to say, why am I doing this? And if you're not in a headspace where you're doing it for the pure give back or the pleasure it gives you just internally from giving of yourself to others, um, uh, then reframe your thought process and figure out how to get there and do that. And there's so many programs out there that do that, volunteer and otherwise. Like I said, to be quite honest with you, had I found the Mayfly Project before I found Healing Waters, I probably would have volunteered for that.
Yes.
I just think the children, it's such a cool thing,
Yes.
and what it does for a foster child. I mean, they do everything we do, just on to a different demographic, and that sense of empowerment that's got to give a kid. Uh,
Yes.
to say, I can go fishing, I can go do this, and I'll be okay. Because
Yeah.
at the end of the day, for us, it's just fishing. A
Right.
lot of people look at whatever movie you've watched, whether it's the river runs through it from a long time ago, or even the modern stuff. It looks like, oh, it's so intimidating. It's beautiful. At the end of the day, you're just throwing a line out on the water. You're being a kid again. That's all it is.
Yes. Yes. Woody, thank you so much for being so gracious with your time and your wisdom. So appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me. And I'm not entirely sure about the wisdom piece, but I really do appreciate you having me on. And I'm looking forward to seeing you guys again.
Yes. Yes. We will be back out. And thanks so much to Amy and Tim Stockham for their incredible open hearts, how they introduce people, for all that you guys are. I just have such deep appreciation. And for the whole group of projecthealingwaters.org, I am so grateful for the work that you are doing, helping people to feel a new sense of community, a new space that feels like home. And we say thank you to you, our incredible audience, listening in. We are just so pleased that we get to be with you once a week. Thank you so much for this gift. Until next time, take really good care of you.